교수님 오조하자. 오히려 네. 오히려 힘들어요.
마이크 테스트. 줌에 계신 분들 제 목소리 들리시나요?
네, 잘 들립니다, 교수님.
네, 감사합니다.
교수님, 마이크 꺼져 있습니다.
I'm sorry. So this is a presentation order, as you know. So please get ready if you are about to have your presentation. And let me give you some more information on today's presentation. As you already know, your presentation time will be from 5 to 8 minutes. And if there are questions, and it would be great if you have about 3 minutes Q&A session after your presentation. And also you are going to evaluate other groups' presentation by following standards: clarity over explanation, novelty and necessity of their idea, and communication with audience. And the compliance with presentation time will be counted by me. I'm going to do that. So you are actually going to evaluate 3 factors. And there will be additional personal bonus point. So if you have any question about the presentation, and please leave a message on a Zoom group chat as a public message by saying your student ID, and then I'm going to let you ask any question to the group that just presented, right? And if your question is great, it's going to be decided by me. Then you will get plus 0.5 point. And also you can have multiple questions, and the maximum bonus points will be 2 points, right? So again, at every presentation, if you have any question, please say your student ID in the Zoom chatting room as a public message. Don't send me a private message. I'm going to skip that. Anyway, so this is additional information for today's presentation evaluation, right? And also, of course, so this is the link you should go, and this is the link to where you can evaluate other groups' presentation. So these, if you go to this link, or I'm going to share this link. 채팅창은 맨날 숨어 있어서 안 나오네. All right, I guess you know how to access this link through QR code. Let me check that again. 카카오톡으로 해줘야겠다. Right, so this is the link to the evaluation survey. So there will be 11 sections for group evaluation, and if that is your group's presentation turn, and rate just full scores for every item. 여러분 조가 발표하는 중이면 그냥 다 어차피 상관없으니까 5점으로 뭐 빵점 주셔도 돼요. 네, 5점으로 주십시오. 5점이 만점이에요. 네. Alright. Also, if you don't submit your answers of this survey form after all the presentations, and your attendance will not be confirmed, which means you are going to consider absent this class, right? So when you successfully submit your answers, then you'll get prompt that a message like thank you for your response. So if it is shown, then it means you successfully submitted your answers, right? Right, one more thing for this one. So if you have any question, please turn on your microphone and ask it in English, right? And also, it's kind of obvious, but for those who are confused, your presentation has to be in English, given in English. And also, Q&A session will be conducted in English as well. So question and answer should be in English, all right? Okay, is there any question about this? Are there any questions?
교수님.
네.
그러면 지금 모든 학생들이 그 카메라도 켜야 되는 건가요? 아니면 발표자만 켜면 되는 건가요?
잘 안 들리네요.
그
모든 학생들까지 들었어요.
그 카메라 말씀드린 건데요. 그
네,
카메라는
어떤 거요? 안 들리지?
카메라.
화면.
네, 화면이요.
네, 모든 학생들이 화면을 보는 거냐고요?
본인 얼굴이 나오게 켜야 되는지 아니면 발표자만.
네, 발표하는 사람은 화면을 켜주세요. So if you are the presenter, and then turn on your camera so that everyone can see the presenter's face. Also, but the question-wise, just turn on your microphone. Then I think that would be enough. Okay? 그러니까 발표자는 당연하겠지만 카메라를 켜고 발표를 해주시고요. 뭐 얼굴이 조그맣게밖에 안 나오긴 할 거예요. 화면 공유하면. 어쨌든 켜주시고 질문하는 학생은 뭐 굳이 켤 필요는 없습니다. 그러니까 마이크만 켜고 질문을 해주셔도 충분할 것 같아요. 네, 뭐 물론 카메라를 켜고 예의를 갖춰서 질문해 주셔도 좋습니다. 네.
교수님,
네.
가조가 발표자가 카메라가 고장난 걸로 알고 있어서요.
저 되게 소리가 작게 들리는데 잠시만요. 이게 왜 이렇게
네.
작게 들리지?
아닙니다. 화면 킬 수 있...
네. 지금 뭐라고 얘기는 들리는데 안 들렸어요.
네, 해결을 했습니다. 네.
뭔가 연결은 되니까 소리가 나가긴 하는데. 줌에서 소리가 작은 거였구나. 네. 뭐 혹시나 제가 캐치 못했으면 채팅창으로 질문을 다시 해주시겠어요? 제가 네, 채팅창으로 답변 드릴게요.
네, 알겠습니다.
소리 커졌네. 네. Alright, 이제 그러면 또 질문
아직
있나요?
안 했어.
질문 있나요?
저 교수님,
네.
저 그 해당 링크에 권한이 없다고 뜨는데 어떻게
혹시
해야 돼요?
한동대 계정 없어요?
타대생이어가지고.
학교한테 안 받아 학교에서 그 계정 안 줬어요?
제가 한번 확인해 보겠습니다.
네, 지금 빨리 확인하고 알려주세요. 네, 또 그 사이에 질문 있나요? 네, 그러면 지금 혹시 7조 그룹 7?
네.
네, 준비되셨나요? Are you ready?
Yes, you're ready.
Okay. Not yet. So let's begin in 5 minutes. 4시 15분에 시작합시다. 알겠죠? 제가 화면 공유 권한을 일단은 해드릴게요. 화면을 미리 해놓으셔도 될 것 같고 발표 시간은 질문 시간 포함 아닙니다. 네, so 4시 15분에 시작하겠습니다. Let's begin at 4:15. Alright? 네, 혹시 시작하기 전에 그 evaluation form을 한번 새로 고침 한번 해주십시오. Before we start, please refresh your evaluation form once more, because some settings has been changed. Right, so maybe you have to enter your email address at this time. So please don't forget to enter your Handong email address. Right. So I think it's time to begin. Right. So group 7, if you're ready, let's get started.
Can everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Now then I'll begin my presentation. Okay. Hello, we are group 7 and I'm Jo Hae-rin, who are going to start the presentation for today. And before we begin, we divided our work into data collectors and then PPT maker and presenter. So our topic was to find the possible problems that may arise in negative pressure units for the mental illness patients. So we ended up with our purpose as laying the foundations for solutions by defining the possible problems in negative pressure units for mental illness patients. And then we divide the table of contents in order of the conduction of research, and then briefly about the what the negative pressure units is and the mental illness is about. And we are going to state the problems of mental patients with negative pressure units and what kind of the possible problem statements are there, and ended up with the questions and sources, and any questions that you have, you can ask me and of the PPT. So this is the conditions of research that we have divided. So we just thought that we could divide into two main categories, which is focus groups and the using editorial and article. So from those two categories, we can figure out the interviews of the medical team from the article and the current situation report of the COVID-19 pandemic and how they're actually affecting in our society of health and the welfare as well. So what is actually the negative pressure unit is? So before we have to define the real problem of between the negative pressure units and then the patient's illness, we need to know what it actually is and how the structures are working in negative pressure. So it is actually the isolation room for the patients with infectious illnesses. So if you see the upper right picture, there is a PEGIGO, which is the exhausted system, and it is actually filtered the viruses and germs and only purify the air that's coming from the outside to the inside. So that therefore the internal pressure is lower than the outside of the pressure, so that the contaminated air cannot be escaped from the inside. So the bottom of the picture is actually the picture of the negative pressure units in Korea. So it is the method is commonly used to in COVID-19 patients these days, and they are the main targets. And actually, as of the report of the April 2020, we have only 535 beds. They are being operated in the 29 medical institutions, which is selected as the national hospitalization wards. So then what is actually the mental illnesses? Then we need to know just basic definitions of it. So it's actually the mental and the behavior abnormalities that causes the problems in personal and social functions. And the bottom of the examples are some sort of the mental illnesses are listed. And we need to know how they really actually have an adverse effect to mental patients. Well, we can just generally say that since the mental patient has some kind of disorder in behavior and mental, so it is kind of more risky if their surroundings changed. So therefore, the doctors and the treatments of the center have some kind of limitations in using negative pressure units. Since everyone knows that the most important to prevent the spread of COVID-19 is the patient's cooperation and the compliance of quarantine guidelines. However, for the mentally ill people, they have some problems of cooperation and communication in the course of treatment. So for example, for the schizophrenia, which is called as a 조현병, it is some kind of the people have some kind of delusions, so that if they just think that they are getting hurt from the doctors, even the doctors were not actually meant to. So there's a problem of refusing getting the treatment and problem of showing the aggressive behavior as well. But still, they need to be hospitalized since they do not know what kind of attitude or like behavior they should take when they get infectious disease. So we have, first of all, classified as the claustrophobia as one of the problems. So people who got the claustrophobia, it is very difficult to withstand the treatment in isolated rooms. So if they are just in the confined spaces, their mental illness can be heightened and it could be more worsened in severe cases. And for secondly, the morphophobia could be also the one of the biggest problem, since it is the fear that just they get the fear of treatment and the pain of the current disease. So even they were not actually infected from the disease, because of the self-awareness symptoms, they just think themselves that they caught on the disease. So therefore, it is really difficult to distinguish between the health information because of the wide range of the areas. And thirdly, the financial support could be the one of the biggest problem as well. Since for the negative pressure units, there's no rooms for the mental patients except for the only nation hospital that is for the ordinary people. And then it is cost about the 4 billion won to 5 billion won to build a unit of negative pressure rooms. But what if it would have been like if the negative pressure unit was built in National Nation Mental Hospital? Then probably the 100 people could be diagnosed at once in the face of the infectious disease epidemic. So we have concluded that the cost of building negative pressure unit is so high. So it is therefore the many mental patients are being treated in poor conditions. And lastly, the shortage of doctors could be the last problems that we have decided. Since the mental patients need a lot of cares and they need a professional caregiver. So therefore, because of the physical exhaustion of the doctors and a lot of the diverse infection routes, it's gonna be really tricky for the doctors to take care of the mental patients. So therefore, we have each of us has some questions about the mental patients between the negative pressure units, and these are the questions that we all had while we researched it. So, and then this is the sources that we have referred. And yes, thank you for listening.
All right, thank you. I should use. All right, thank you for your presentation. And is there any slide for briefly summarize your problems you found?
In our PPT, you mean?
If there is not, then would you briefly re-summarize your problems, 4 problems you have mentioned?
Oh, sure. Should I also share the PPT slide as well?
Yes, please.
Okay. So for the problems, we have found a lot of like general problems and the kind of specific problems. So first of all, for the general problems, there could be there will be the problem with the communication and cooperation of the patients, since it is really hard to request them a kind of the quarantine guidelines, and then there could be some kind of difficulties between doctors and the patients, and that could be the one of the factors. And the claustrophobia could be the one of the problem, because negative pressure unit is some places that only the one person can be placed in one unit.
Right,
So
right.
if
You don't need to explain once again. So just briefly say the 4 problems again. Just that's enough.
okay. So it won't be the claustrophobia problems.
All right.
And the second will be the morphophobia because of the fear getting the disease. And then the financial problems. And then lastly with the shortage of doctors.
All right. Thank you. All right. So students, do you have any questions? Please leave a message in the Zoom chatting room. Maybe you are typing, I guess. Don't miss the personal bonus point. 질문 있으면 학번을 적어주세요. 학번을. 네, 질문이 없나 보죠? Right. I think your presentation is very well summarized. So I think we will have some more time to discuss about your presentation topic later. So thank you for your presentation again, and let's move on to the next presentation. Right. Group. Next one is group 10. Right. Are you there? Group 10.
Yes, 네, 있습니다.
네, 화면 공유해 주십시오.
Can you see and hear clearly?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. 시작하겠습니다. Hi everyone. Okay. Hi everyone. Our team is 10 and I'm Myungjun. Let me start the presentation. Okay, before the discussion about main topic, I will explain about what is NPU. Have you heard about NPU? Maybe not. Anyway, NPU means negative pressure unit. This is a special isolated room that keeps infectious disease patient away from visitors, medical staffs, and other patients. The principle of NPU is to use pressure difference. The air goes from high pressure to low pressure, right? Maybe you run it in middle school or elementary school. Anyway, it keeps internal pressure to low to prevent air from leaking out of the room. And like this image, the air exposed to the risk of infection flows toward filter called the high performance filter, HEPA filter. It sounds great, right? Of course, in this COVID-19 era, it can work very well. However, there are some problems too. The first problem is waste of space. NPU requires more space than a normal room. According to our survey data, NPU needs a 15 square and normal room needs a 6.3 square meter. And second problem is low profitability. NPU is expensive to install and cost of operation and maintenance is more expensive. So the third problem is inefficiency. Combined with the above problems, NPU needs many costs and money, space, and humans, but the actual utilization rate is less than half. Of course, in COVID-19 era, maybe NPU is poor, but after COVID-19, NPU may not be poor. So although NPU works very well in COVID-19 and some infectious disease, we can't expand it endlessly. So, okay, let's move on to the main topic. So what is the negative effect of MPU on the patients with mental illness? First is low pressure. As I said, MPU uses pressure difference. And low pressure has some negative effects on humans. The first effect of low pressure is to activate the parasympathetic nerve. If this nerve is overactivated, you can suffer headache and lethargy. And this can have negative effect on patients with mental illness. And the second effect of low pressure is inhibiting the serotonin metabolism. This causes impulsive behavior. And impulsive behavior can be very fatal problems to mentally unstable patients. Next is isolation. Basically, the purpose of MPU is isolation of infectious patients. And isolation can have bad effect on patients, especially patients with mental illness. The data is MEDUS data, and the data of MEDUS indicate that 47.2% of patients felt anxiety, and 16.6% of patients felt anger. This anxiety and anger and this negative emotion can be bad to mentally unstable patients. In addition, according to our survey data, there is a high probability of anxiety or anger is continuing even after isolation. Like this image, after isolation, risk of persistent anxiety 1.8 times, risk of persistent anger is 2.4 times. In conclusion, our team concluded that low pressure and isolation can cause problems for patients with mental illness. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions from students? 질문 있으시면 부탁드려요. All right. So while you are preparing the questions, I have a question. So the problems you have mentioned, like isolation and what was the other one, the low pressure, are the things that can also cause problems to ordinary people, not only the patients with mental illness?
Yes, it can be problem to ordinary people, but we think the impulsive behavior and legacy things and some anxiety and anger can be more fatal to mentally unstable person too.
Okay, I see. So I think it would be better if you kind of specify why it is more important issue than the others, especially for patients with mental illness. So it seems like all the problems can happen for every ordinary people, patients. So maybe you have to pick what is difference between what kind of different situation can happen from the situation between the ordinary people and patients with mental illness, right? Right. So the first question, there is first question. So 조혜린 학생, so ask a question. So turn on your microphone and say your question.
I kind of wonder if for the people who have some kind of mental problems, so is there any real cases or some kind of examples they actually got a negative effect when they were staying in the low pressure unit?
Real case, okay.
A case. Maybe in not in this P50. Maybe we don't have any more specific case. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we don't have any specific case, maybe.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so maybe you have to find more real cases so that it is assured that your problem can really should really have to be fixed, right? Right, and one more student, 송민영, would you turn on your microphone and say your question?
Yes. You announced that negative pressure affects the body. Is this enough air pressure to affect the body?
Can you repeat?
You announced that negative pressure affects the body. Is this enough air pressure to affect the body?
You can see that Zoom chatting room, so there is also question text.
Sorry. Maybe some inner pressure can affect opposite effect. Maybe.
Right, that's your answer, right? Okay, right. So thank you for your presentation again. And next presentation is Group 5, right? Group 5 will give their presentation in classroom, right? So this is Group 3, Group 5.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Dae Kim from Group 5, and the topic of my presentation today is problem of patient with mental illness in MPU. Our group divided the subject into two main problems. Firstly, the problem caused by using MPU. Secondly, the problem caused by mental illness. And last, we will explain the possible problem of patient with mental illness in MPU. Let's start with what is MPU. NPU is a abbreviation, negative pressure unit. More specifically, special hospital room for the isolation of infectious disease patients. So use pressure to isolate and prevent infection between rooms. Here's the pictures of NPU. It is a single room and all part of the room is fully sealed so that no air goes outside. NPU is restricted to face other people except medical staff because NTU is fully sealed. Also, entry process is complex and takes a long time to go in order to prevent the risk of infection. Look, this is the inside NPU. As you can see, the air pressure inside the hospital room was designed to always flow only inside the room, so that internal air contaminated with virus and germs would not be discharged outside. Also, you can see that there are two doors for the entrance. The reason why we use NPU is that many infectious diseases are transmitted through the air. COVID-19, as we know well, can be also be impacted by the virus in tiny droplets or particles that float in the air per minute to hour. In other words, NPU is used to treat with minimal threat or further infection. The data you can see here is the number of persons infected with medicine in Korea 2015. Can you see the sudden increase in the number of infected people? The sudden increase is occurred because the hospital kept medicine patients in a normal hospital room. If the hospital used NPU to hospitalize medicine patients, the situation wouldn't go or was like this. So here the problem caused by NPU. NPU constraint is divided to physical constraint and mental constraint. Physical constraint is restriction of radius of action, constraint of basic desire, such as food, sex, sleeping environment. Mental constraint, first is difficulty in relieving stress. Second, social impossibility, such as a break in human relation and communication. And finally, fear of uncertainty. Now let's move on to cause of mental illness. And among the mental illness, our group focused on depression. Why? Because depression is a basic symptom of mental illness, and it can cause many additional mental problems. One of the most critical factors of depression is social disconnection. For example, corona flu is one of the results of the depression. Let me elaborate on that. What caused problem to patient in NPU? Restriction of radius of action, decreased activity, increased depression, and hysteric stress. It can also cause another mental illness. Restrictions on access of mental medical staff. Non-face-to-face counseling and face-to-face counseling are different. Let me ask you a question. Which do you think is efficient? Non-face-to-face class or through Zoom or face-to-face class? I think it's face-to-face class. Same goes for counseling. Non-face-to-face counseling can have what's the effect? It is difficult to cope with sudden behavior of patient. It is hard to relieve the stress of the patient. It can cause other mental problems. Restricted using mental illness treatment device. Our group thinks that the biggest problem of patients with mental illness in MPU is the increase of depression by social disconnection. As I explained the previous slide, depression is the basic symptom of mental illness. This means the increased depression can cause other serious mental disease and can be critical to patients. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so any questions from students? All right, so my question, I have, all right, would you answer the question first, the chatting room?
Depression patient, 한국어로는 안 되죠.
연혜연 학생, would you turn on your microphone and ask your question?
Yes, thank you for your presentation. And my question is, can you give me an example of the emergency situation that you mentioned?
Depression patient is 이제 우울증 환자 같은 경우에는 아무래도 충동적으로 자해나 그런 경우를 할 수도 있기 때문에 그 경우에는 이제 출입할 때 왜냐면은 이제 미세먼지 같은 것도 들어가면 안 되고 바이러스 같은 출입 같은 제한이 되기 때문에 이제 그런 경우에 이제 관리자가 들어가서 막을 수가 없다라는 걸 저희는 말씀드리고 있었습니다.
Thank you for your kind answer.
Right, and student 박주훈.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. Could you tell me about the typical symptoms of COVID flu in detail?
일반적으로 우울증은 이제 무기력함에서 오기 때문에 코로나 블루로 이제 밖에 나가서 생활할 수 없음에 인한 무기력으로 인해서 이제 무기력증이 가장 큰 일반적인 증상이라고 생각합니다.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and last student, 양은영, would you please go ahead?
I didn't understand why there is a constraint like food and sleeping environment. Can you give me an example about how, is there any example of people really felt that way?
Sorry, I can't hear.
I didn't understand why there is a constraint like food and sleeping environment. You said there's constraint, right?
음식 같은 경우에는 저희는 일단은 MPU를 잘 모르기 때문에 일반적인 조사뿐만 아니라 일단 MPU에 직접 들어가 있는 상황을 보고자 브이로그 같은 걸 살펴봤는데 브이로그에서 이제 배달 음식과 아니면은 예전에 먹고 싶었던 뭐 부모님의 음식 같은 경우를 먹기 위해서는 이제 많은 시간이 걸리고 먹는다고 해도 그게 잘 이게 같지가 않으니까 이게 많이 스트레스를 받는다 하는 부분을 봤기 때문에 저희는 적었습니다.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you for your presentation again. And next presentation is group 3 presentation. Right.
Okay, I'm Jun Jung. We are group 3. The theme of our presentation is find the problems that may raise an MPU for patient with mental illness. The contents is like this. First, what is MPU? Second, finding problems. And third, questions. And what is MPU? I'm strongly sure many of you know what it means, aren't you? MPU is like that. They're called negative pressure rooms. The air pressure inside the room is lower than the air pressure outside the room. So this means that when the door is open, potentially contaminated air or other dangerous particles from inside the room will not flow outside into non-contaminated areas. And let me explain the characteristics of some MPU. The negative room is based on a single room, and all walls, floors, and ceilings in the room are not exposed to air movement, and the wall joints are sealed. Yes, like that. In other words, the air polluted by the virus or germ does not go outside. And finding problems. These MPU are used for the treatment of patients with infectious disease, such as COVID-19. I'll explain what problem this MPU causes, especially in patients with mental illness. The problems we have found are these follows. And have you ever seen these articles before? Yeah, oh, no? Okay. This article says that this autistic patient caused some damage to himself and his families during self-isolation time. It's such a hard time for themselves and their families, even with self-isolation. How many problems would there be if they were into use MPUs? I'll explain the problems we found one by one. Because of the unfamiliar environments, mental patients can be afraid. Since mental patients are not well adapted to unfamiliar environments, their current condition can deteriorate or develop new symptoms. Closed space can also cause anxiety in patients with anxiety disorders because MPUs are generally single-person rooms with a narrow space and closed joints to prevent air movement. Since MPU deal with patients with infectious disease and mental staff are wearing masks or protective clothing, which can be unfamiliar and repulsive to patients. And sunlighting is an important issue for some patients, like seasonal depression patient and depression patient. Less sunlight produces a lot of hormones that increase depression, and it causes anxiety. The MPU is an isolation facility, so it is blocked from the outside, and some rooms even have no windows. And patients with mental illness often refuse general hospitalization treatment. MPU cause them great resistance. Even some patients are experiencing great inconvenience in using external facilities, and paranoia patients are very reluctant to be brought to place that is not their will. And in case of disconnection anxiety patients or child and youth patient like that, being separated from their attachment can cause serious panic. And this hospital room is restricted to people in and out of the hospital due to its characteristics. Therefore, ordinary people use glass walls to communicate with outside world. However, patients with severe mental disorders, such as intellectual disabilities, have a great deal of difficulty communicating with the outside world. Some mental patients in the midst of extreme stress and anxiety may feel repulsed, even though they can't express themselves. Uncertain situation about when treatment is over and when the patient returns to his daily life increase anxiety. This is not just for mental patient and for patients who are treated in MPU. And mental patients need continuous treatment to suit their characteristics, such as behavior therapy, cognitive therapy, and counseling therapy. But these treatments are hard to achieve in NPU that requires isolation. For mental patients, forming rapport, which is a trust with doctors, is important. However, in NPU, there is difficulty in forming this rapport because there is little interaction with doctors. And they are not doctors who have previously treated and established a relationship. And many of the problems we talked about before lead to another problem of delaying the treatment. This has a negative effect on patients by depriving them of the opportunity to receive treatment at an appropriate time. This is not just only a personal level problem, but also a social problem. And this is a list of the problems in order of importance established by our team members. And on this basis, we believe that is more valuable. And questions? Here are questions that we had while preparing for the presentations. Here they are. And we'll ask the question when we meet an expert next week. Yeah. And I'm Jiun Jung, a member of Group 3. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you for your presentation. And just a quick question. Have you tried to search the real case? Actually, you showed us a real case that for the autistic kid having problem is the NPU situation, right? Yes. And we just not attached this presentation in a source that. All right. So have you tried to search that kind of situations in other countries? That case was kind of, I thought it was Korean situation, Korean case, right? Oh, right. Okay. And also, if you have any further questions from students, please. Right, there is a question from Noon Ho. Would you turn on your microphone as a question? Right.
Is there a concrete example for patient repression by medical staff protection clauses?
Okay. In these articles, yeah, some mental illness patients have low cognitive thoughts, and so they don't know why we are closing masks like that, or why their staff protection clause, why they don't know, just like that. And this makes the anxiety and depression for that mental illness patient. And 현명하고님.
강현면 학생. All right.
Yeah. Could you explain the specific standard you set as you announced the priority?
Yes, psychological. This effect is related of psychological. And do you know the hormone of serotonin? Serotonin is serotonin. It increased the depression, and if we do not see the sunlight other time, serotonin lacks of serotonin leads to the depression, and the melatonin is leads to the melatonin leads to the increase the anxiety. Yeah, that's right then. 혹시 현명하고님이 얘기하셨나요, 방금?
Yes.
죄송합니다. 그 밑에 있는 걸 읽어가지고. And we thought that, okay, sorry. Okay, we thought that we focused on just on not MPU, and we thought a social problem is more prioritiable than just this environmental problems or resistance anxiety. Yeah, so we need to more prioritiable that problems or rapport or this this presentation. Yep.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
All right, and next presentation is group 2. Group 2, are you there?
Yes.
Could you share your screen? Please go ahead.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Hyung, presenter. Our group 2 will present the topic find problems that may arise in MPU for patients with mental illness. Yes, we present in the following order. Yeah, what is the MPU? Before I explain the problem, I will briefly introduce the negative pressure unit. A negative pressure unit, in other words, a negative pressure loom. MPU is a special isolation loom that artificially drops the air pressure inside the loom, preventing the pathogen from spreading out. Today, it's a loom that isolates patients with infectious disease that are prone to spread like COVID-19. Yeah. First, we followed this process to think about what the problem could be with negative pressure looms in patients with mental illness. The characteristics of the negative pressure loom are that it must be used alone, isolated from the outside, and restrict access. So what are the essential needs of most mental patients while they are hospitalized? Of course, it depends on the type of mental illness, but they need medication, play therapy, someone who can take care of them. Yes, thinking about these two things, we'll able to find 5 problems. First is the effect of MPU on patients. If a patient is isolated in a negative pressure loom, the patient may feel isolated, which may adversely affect the patient. Due to the characteristics of the negative pressure loom, the patient must use the hospital room alone and isolation from the outside, which may increase the patient's anxiety. And in severe cases, the patient may experience difficulty breathing or physical problems. Second, there may be problems in the process of treating mental illness due to a disruption in the progress of the group therapy program for mentally ill patients. Because the patient is isolated, group therapy cannot be carried out, and play therapy that can only be carried out by meeting people will be restricted. Though it can be dangerous when the patient is alone. For patients who are at risk for self-harm or injury, a nurse is required, but due to the procedure for entering the isolation ward, immediate response is not possible. When entering the negative pressure loom, you must wear protective clothing and go through disinfection procedures because these procedures delay time. First, Repeated entry and exit to care for or subdue mental patients may incur additional costs associated with protective clothing. The protective clothing is for one-time use, so if you go in and out once, the protective clothing should be discarded. We evaluated the importance of the powerful bombs and ranked them according to their importance. Our group ranked the importance of the powerful bombs in order of 1, 3, 2, 4. Reasons that determining priorities in the following order. On 3 case, we decided to be a top priority because it is closely related to the patient's healthy. In case 2, it is related to the treatment of patients' mental illness, which is determined as the second priority because this can be replaced by medication. In case 4, money was decided as the last priority because we thought it was less important than the patient's healthy. The questions in all group are 2 below. One is how can family member visit NPU patients? Second are negative pressure baskets used in Korea. Thank you for listening to Group 2's presentation.
Right, thank you. While the students are preparing their question, I think one of the questions you prepared for the talk next week, that you mentioned the caregivers, family members, right? So I think I'm not sure how many groups have prepared the issue with the family members, but I think it'd be also an interesting topic that we consider the caregivers who have their mental illness patients in NPU room, right? Okay, 최윤성 학생, would you please go ahead? You ask your question.
Can you clarify in the sound effect, sound pressure room and negative pressure room?
I can hear. 댓글로 써주실 수 있나요? 채팅으로 써줄 수 있나요? 안 들려.
Can you clarify relation between negative pressure room and sound pressure room?
Negative pressure. Sound pressure.
지금 질문 들렸어요?
아니 끊겨서 들려가지고.
끊겼어요? 지금
네네.
아까부터 안 들렸어요?
아까는 소리가 울려서 안 들리고 앞부분에 살짝 끊겨가지고.
한 번만 더 해주세요.
Can you clarify relation between sound pressure room and negative pressure room?
뭐라 해야 되지?
그 목차에서 보면은 이제 사운드 프레셔 룸이라 적혀 있어가지고 질문 드리는 건데 이게 그 NPU하고 이제 그 사운드 프레셔 룸하고 어떤 관계가 있는지.
사운드 프레셔 룸이라고 적혀.
그 목차예요.
아하, 저희가 제 생각에는 번역하는 과정에서 뭔가 있지 않았을까라는 생각이 드는데 잠깐만요. 네, PPT 제작하는 과정에서 뭔가 사고가 있었던 것 같거든요.
뭔가
네, PPT 때 잘못 들어갔나 것 같아요.
Right. And the last question from 김태민 학생.
As I know that, isn't there no additional cost because of the government support that COVID-19 fee? As I know that.
We think that's right. 혹시 한국말로 말해도 괜찮을까요? 코로나19로만 한정 지었을 경우에는 추가 비용이 발생하지 않을 수 있다고 생각하는데, 다른 정신질 환자가 음압병실 어떤 코비드-19을 제외한 전염병을 걸렸을 때도 사용할 수 있기 때문에 그거에 대한 비용은 다른 일반 병동에 비해서 3배 정도 더 들어간다고 저희가 자료를 찾았고 그것에 바탕으로 해서 비용이 더 많이 부담될 수 있다고 저는 발표한 것 같습니다.
All right. Thank you for your presentation again. Next presentation will be a presentation from 지금 몇 조가 있죠? 그룹 4조가 해야 되는 건가요? All right. So group 4, are you there? Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. So after group 4's presentation, let's have a quick break time. So, all right. So until group 4, right? So let's have a presentation from group 4. Okay. Would you share your screen?
Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Yu Jun, and I'm in Team 4, and I'll be presenting my team's project on the MPU. So we organized our presentation like this, and I will now give like a brief explanation of what the MPU is. So basically, MPU is a room with infectious that keeps patients with infectious illnesses or patients who are susceptible to infections away from others. So in other words, it's an isolation room to prevent the spread of an infection. And how it works is that the air pressure inside the room is lower than outside of the room. So if the door is opened, the contaminated air or particles do not flow outside of the room to prevent spreading. And some of the problems of the MPU that we thought was, the first one is the environmental issues. There are cameras that are constantly watching the patients, so then it can be seen as intruding one's personal life. And not only that, but these machines that are inside the MPUs are really loud, which can disturb the patients all the time. There are also, the second one is structural issues. The MPUs is an enclosed room, so then it can cause anxiety, nausea, dysnopia, and for patients with claustrophobia. So in serious cases, the patients may have a seizure or have a violent reaction such as screaming loudly or even fainting. And not only that, because it is an isolation room, it can cause loneliness and depression because they have limited access to talking with other people face to face. And if prolonged for a long time, patients may hear ringing in their ears or even auditory hallucinations because it is one of the symptoms for being isolated for a very long time. And the third problem that we have found out was there could be lifestyle issues such as lack of exercise. The lack of exercise can increase in weight, which could develop low self-esteem and even symptophobia. This graph shows like the basic idea of people who are overweight. So then the numbers on the left side show the life total score. So the higher it is, the better quality of life they have. And then the bottom one shows the BMI. So as you can see, the higher the BMI a person has, the lower quality of life that they have. So then the decrease in exercise can lead to decrease in stamina and levels of immunity, which is crucial because the patients are in the isolation rooms because they have a disease. So without exercise, their immune system can be lowered, which is a very harmful process to the patients. So our group prioritized the problems into like this. So we thought the environmental issue was the top priority, and then structural issue, and then lifestyle issues. So the reason is like this: a person can get stressed at any moment and every moment. So it is really crucial that we have to pay attention to these problems. So in conclusion, so mental effects that the MPUs caused were more severe among those with history of anxiety or depression. And for mentally ill patients, negative pressure rooms can cause higher level of mental problems than general patients. So, and our group came up with, started up with these two questions as we are working on the project. So first one is, do you offer mental treatment to patients living in MPU? And the second one, if so, what treatments do you do? Thank you for listening.
All right, thank you for your presentation. And is there any questions from students? I have a quick question, not really a big one, but
yes.
Maybe where did you find your the information? What kind of resources have you used?
We divided our group into specific roles, and I'm only the presenter, so it's my group members who found the information and shared it with me. So one group member said they found the information from a YouTube vlog.
All right.
And then another group member said that they found theirs from news articles.
Right, I see.
Yes.
Okay, there is a question from 정슬기. Would you, 정슬기 학생, would you turn on your microphone and ask your question?
Yes. Is there a case of increased depression caused by CSTB? Wouldn't there be more positive effects of monitoring abnormal behavior of mental patients than the negative effects of CSTB?
My answer to that would be no, it would not provide positive results because the mental illness patients, did you say mental illness patients? Sorry, can you repeat your question one more time?
So you can see the Zoom chatting room, and there is a text question.
mental patients. My answer to that would be it would not provide positive results because the mental illness patients, they can be, the main role is to cure the patients. Yes, that is correct, but it could also worsen the illness because the constant just evaluation of the patients can like make them feel like they're intruding their personal life, like whatever they do is being constantly monitored. So then they can like, it can provide even more negative results.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have further question on this. So the CCTV you mentioned, is it the patient? You mean the situation that patient knows about they are being monitored?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The problem caused by the CCTV situation.
Yes.
You assume that the patient knows that he or she is being monitored.
Yes.
So there is a certain camera in a room, then it kind of moves around, looking at some points in the room, then you mentioned that kind of situation. Or there is a hidden camera in a room so that the patient is kind of, the monitoring is kind of ambient monitoring, so that maybe patient don't need to get disturbed by that camera. So what kind of situation have you imagined?
From what we've learned, it's not a hidden camera. So then it is very likely for the patients to realize that they are being monitored.
Right. Okay, so are there other questions? The final question. All right, 신민주 학생. All right.
Okay, I think lifestyle problems can occur even if not a mental patient. Is there a special lifestyle problem that only the patient have?
So not only exercising, there are such as like, because they are isolated, they can't go on with their daily lives. They have to be constantly monitored, as I mentioned before. So then they have to adapt to, they have to change their life to fit the needs of the people who are taking care of them. So it could really be difficult for the patients, and that is one of the problems that can arise for specifically MPU patients.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no more questions,
마이크가 잠깐. Right, sorry. So thank you for your presentation again. So let's have a quick break time until 5:30. So next presenter, please get ready by 5:30, right? So, right. So let's take a break. Group 8, are you there?
Yes, Professor.
Could you share your screen in advance? 1 minute.
Okay.
All right, so when you're ready, please start your presentation.
Hello. We are Group 8 presenter, Nayeon Kim and Minyoung Song. We will talk about problems in NPU for patients with mental illness. This is contents of our presentation. We will talk about what NPU is and 2 types of problems in NPU with mental illness. Then we conclude our presentation. First, what is NPU? Have you ever heard about NPU? I'm sure that you heard about it. NPU, negative pressure unit, is a room for isolating air-mediated infectious disease patients. The room is designed to minimize damage due to the propagation of infection disease by preventing internal air from escaping to outside by maintaining continuous negative pressure. According to Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, the room as a pressure isolation zone is physically divided into a negative pressure zone and a non-negative pressure zone. The term negative pressure zone means an area set at a lower pressure than a non-negative pressure zone. And the term non-negative pressure zone is an area adjacent to a negative pressure zone where nursing stations are installed. Let's talk about 2 types of problems that can occur when a patient with mental illness stays NPU. We divide 2 categories into problem case by space constraints and problem that case by psychological deterioration in patient. Space constraint can cause various problems. One of problem is difficult to get help from caregiver for patients who have difficulty in their daily life. As mentioned earlier, the negative pressure room is completely separate from the inside and outside of the room, and there are restrictions on access. If the degree of psychotic symptom is very severe, people may not be able to make a simple daily life. For these patients, the caregiver's help is absolutely necessary. The characteristic of the NPU will make it difficult for caregiver to help. Second, some mentally ill people can make sudden acts such as suicide attempt or threat. In fact, the on-site response guidance in mental aid emergency, which was distributed in 2016 by the Ministry of Health and Welfare, include importance to coping with unexpected situation in mental patients. However, it will be difficult to respond quickly to the sudden behavior of mentally ill patients because in a negative pressure room, medical staff will have to go through 5 stages to get to the isolation room where the patient is located. Last, poor communication can lead to problems. According to KBS News, in February 2020, due to the characteristic of the negative pressure room, communication between the negative isolation zone and non-negative zone is not smooth. Due to communication problem, there may be problems such as receiving duplicate medication related to the disease.
And next, in the MPI, psychological factors can worsen the illness of patients with mental illness. The factors of deterioration are as follows. First, receiving treatment alone is
The sound is
unpopular.
too. I can't hear the sound.
Sorry.
Who is presenting now?
들리시나요?
네.
네. And next, in the MPR, psychological factor can worsen the illness of patients with mental illness. The factor of deterioration are as follows. First, receiving treatment alone is an unfamiliar environment for a long time can lead to psychological anxiety. By the end of April of this year, 24 out of 18 confirmed patients in the MPR at the National Medical Center, excluding those with mental illness or dementia, were confirmed to have received psychiatric diagnoses such as panic disorder, depression, and severe stress reaction. In addition, 16 out of 18 were prescribed with psychiatric drugs such as anti-anxiety drugs. Given that it has also caused mental illness in the general public, so it is highly likely that depression and panic disorder in existing mental patients will worsen. The second is that counseling treatment for mental illness patients is limited. The MPI was designed as a single room to prevent contact with the others. So patients with a mental illness will be in a difficult situation to receive regular counseling treatment. This interferes with the treatment or mental illness. To sum up, these are possible problems with MPU in patients with a mental illness and special constraints and psychological deterioration. In case of special constraints, first, it is difficult to get help from caregivers. Next, some mentally ill people can make sudden acts. Finally, poor communication can lead to problems. In case of psychological deterioration, first, psychological anxiety can be different. Next, counseling treatment for mental illness may be limited. Do you have any question?
All right. So if you have any questions from students, all right. So student 박준석, you go ahead.
So during the presentation, you have stated that when emergency situation happen, the doctor or the nurse has to get through 5 steps, and that is too long and it might be severe. So I came up to a question that do you think there is any other way, not through entering 5 steps, to stop the sudden act of the patient?
For maintaining negative pressure, 5 stage is essential. So this is essential parts of negative pressure units.
But so some patients with very severe mental illness, they even tie up their hands in the bed so they can prevent them from like hurting themselves or committing suicide. So can that be another way for them to prevent from those sudden acts? Did you get my question?
Can you speak once again?
So
yes.
For some severe mental illness patient,
Yes.
Some of the hospitals even tie up their hands in the bed, on the bed, so that they cannot move or like hurt themselves or commit suicide. So can that be another way for them to prevent sudden act of patient?
Yeah, I think so. That's good idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I think that is the one of the problematic situation you have to solve later. So maybe that could be one of the problems that should have been mentioned. I think so. That's a good question as well. And also, I think the question itself is a problem that we have to solve. I think so. Later, maybe student Park Junseok, did your group already give the presentation?
Not yet.
Not yet. Maybe you guys have that kind of problem in your presentation.
No. I just saw the problem that their team presented, and I thought of the.
Right. So I think we need to also determine if that could be solvable or not. But still, we are in the process of finding problem. So even though it could be impossible to get solved, but first, I think that could be one of the problems we can find. Right. There is one more question from student Jung Ji-hoon. Okay. So
Is the statistics that increase anxiety using MPU not only for the general public, but also for patients with mental illness?
It's not. 한국은 여기. 이미 정신질환이 없는 환자도 정신질환이 생기는 경우의 통계이기 때문에 어느 정도 정신질환이 심화될 수도 있다고 할 수 있을 것 같습니다. 네. 출처는 이제 국립중앙의료원입니다.
So, do you find any statistics, 통계,
yes,
from the internet or other sources? Did you find any kind of statistics? 통계 자료 같은 걸 찾은 게 있나요, 혹시?
네. 9페이지에 있었던 걸 얘기하시는 것 같은데.
Right.
아닌가?
All right. So, like the PPT slide, you mentioned, okay, right. Thank you for your presentation. Right. And next presentation will be group 11, right? So, are you ready? Right. When you're ready. 이 화면이 좀 잘려 보이는데. So group 11, all right. Now Looks fine. Right. All right. So please start your presentation. I can't hear you. 오예지.
Okay. Yes. Can you hear it?
Yes.
Okay. Restart. Hello, everyone. We are Group 11, and I'm Yeji Oh. Today, topic of presentation is problem that in MPU for patient. Oh, sorry. Oh, for patient with mental illness. There are four main things dealt in our presentation. First is introduction of MPU. Second is present condition. Third is problems in MPU for patient with mental illness. Finally, question on talks. What is MPU? A negative pressure unit is a special isolation ward that blocks the spread of pathogens inside the room to the outside. This is the structure of MPU. Thus, MPU is separate from the general area of the hospital and divided into negative pressure and non-negative zone. Also, as you can see it, dressing rooms, restrooms, and bedrooms are installed in the negative pressure unit. The principle of MPU is to control the flow of air using pressure. Since air flows from high pressure to low pressure in principle, keeping the inside of the hospital room at artificially low pressure can block the area inside from escaping out. In addition, air from the hospital room is released through a separate exhaust facility, while invisible bacteria and viruses are filtered out through the HPA HAPAP filter. Using these points, the negative pressure unit controls the air pressure in the room sequentially so that air flows from low to high levels of pollution. So the pressure in the bedroom is the lowest and the pressure in the non-negative isolation zone is the highest. How about the pressure condition of MPU in our country? Currently, the number of negative pressure units is significantly lower than of regular rooms, and even that is concentrated in certain cities. In particular, there are very few negative pressure units in the National Psychiatric Hospital, and also third country has it among the 5 national mental hospitals. In this regard, patients with mental illness are bound to be more exposed to infection. As the policy changed after COVID-19, about 230 additional MPUs were decided to be installed, and installation was mandatory. What is the problems that in MPU for patients with mental illness? In mentally ill people, infection disease can pose a greater risk than ordinary people. For example, in this COVID-19, there was a major outbreak of corona infection in mental hospitals, starting with Cheongdo Daenam Hospital. So we tried to use MPU to prevent such damage, but there are still many problems to be solved. So we look at whether there were problems when using MPU in hospitals and what should be supplemented if the patient was suffering from mental illness. And this is a ranking of the problems we think. First, MPU have close characteristics which can cause another mental problem for mentally unstable patients. The research of studying the relationship between depression and anxiety in isolation hospital, patients show that more anxious also, their risk increase if recovery and isolation period are uncertain. Second, the budget is insufficient. It costs about $270,000 to set up a sick bed, so many hospitals do not have MPU. However, the number of general hospital rooms can decrease during the installation of many MPUs. Third, the MPU is monitored and controlled 24 hours a day for safety. This can cause patients to be dissatisfied with their unprotected privacy and pose risks such as a medical accident. Finally, MPU may not be able to communicate smoothly because medical staff will complex medical equipment to prevent infection. Lack of emotional communication can bring psychological anxiety to patients with mental illness. And this is the question on top. As we look at the negative pressure unit and the problems with it, we thought of the following question. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Would you pick just 2 questions from your last slide?
Ooh, where?
Any 2 questions? Because it was so quick, so I'd like to see some more. Would you share the screen again?
Okay.
Could you show us the last 2 slides and
okay.
pick any 2 questions you'd like to mention?
I mentioned?
What would you like to pick? If only 2 questions allowed.
Okay. For an efficient medical system in the future, where critical should the hospitals on negative pressure and general hospital rooms be designed to meet? And what are some ways to increase the economic effectiveness of negative pressure rooms?
So for the second question, you actually asked the expertise to answer the way to solve this problem, the economic.
I didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any questions from students? All right. 권회찬 학생.
So my question is, which do you think should come first, protecting personal rights or treating patients?
Could you repeat, please?
Okay. Which do you think should come first, protecting personal rights or treating patients?
I think they're equally important, but I think the right of person is more important than treat patient, because the right of personal is the factor that we must think about it. And the first of all, well, okay. My answer is the protecting personal right is more than important treating patient.
Okay, so that is an interesting question, and I'm not sure if you really can answer to that question. Maybe in next week invited talk, you can ask the same question to the expertise. All right, so student 양은영, the last question.
You said there the installation cost was high in MPU, right?
Yeah.
Do you think it has to do with the problem of having a bunch of patients in MPU and a high installation cost?
Could you repeat one more?
Is there, you said the installation cost of MPU is high?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a relationship between the high installation cost and the problems that may arise that mental illness patients in MPU?
Because MPU is so expensive, so we can installation in general, and especially and especially the it's so expensive. So national, wait a sec. National psychiatric hospital have the more less than in MPU.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you for your presentation again. And the next presentation is group 6. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, so please go ahead.
Did you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, let's get started. I'm Hyunmyeong Kang in Group 6. Before I start, let me introduce content of the entire presentation. Oh, sorry. Our presentation covered these 4 contents: MPU, problems, priority, and question. First, I will briefly explain about the MPU, and then I will talk about problems discussed about the given topic. And then I'm going to tell you why we have listed their problems according to our priorities. At last, I'm going to present some questions. So I will start with the first content. What is MPU? MPU is an isolation room that blocks the spread of pathogen inside the hospital to the outside. Most important feature of the MPU is lower air pressure than the outside environment. This system induces the flow of the air inside and also prevent internal viruses or pathogens coming out. This feature allows general patients outside the MPU to avoid the threat of infection. For this feature, MPU is used as a facility to treat patients with airborne disease. It can prevent the spread of airborne disease. Next, we'll look at the problems that may arise when patients with mental illness are infected with airborne disease and they enter the NPU. These problems are arranged according to the priority we saw. Most important problem we thought is the limitation of mental treatment system. MPU is built for purpose of treating infectious disease, so there is no proper system to treat both infectious disease and mental illness at the same time. Continuous contact and observation by professional medical staff are necessary to care for mental illness. However, due to the feature I said in the first content, continuous contact is difficult and no system has been established to solve that. Second, the deterioration of mental illness. Patients experience a decline in physical activity in the limited space of the MPU. Increased symptoms of anxiety and depression, and high rates of post-traumatic stress disorder and insomnia have been reported to patients with mental illness in the MPU. Third, unable to respond to quickly emergencies. Due to the feature of limited space of the MPU, it is difficult for medical staff to quickly identify and respond to problems with patients or facilities. Patients with mental illness can harm themselves or threaten medical staff, and they can also be involved in the breakdown of medical devices in the MPU. Last, additional medical staff need. Due to the feature of limited space of the MPU, continuous external MPU care is required. This work causes medical staff to have a lot of mental and physical stress. Furthermore, patients with mental illness require more continuous monitoring and attention than normal patients. Therefore, there is a significant shortage of medical staff. In fact, I interviewed chief nurses who works for MPU now. She told me that the department change application of MPU staff is higher than other departments, and it caused a shortage of medical staff in the general MPU. Now that you think about this situation, a medical staff shortage for the MPU is expected to be greater for patients with mental illness who need both infectious and mental illness treatment. Now, I'll explain what standard we have come to prioritize like this. We solved this problem by focusing more on patients than on hospital or facility. MPU is a space for patients to treat their illness. The goal of this facility is to cure patient illness completely. Because patients are the user of the MPU, so we think that considering the feature and circumstance of the user is a top priority. Finally, I'd like to show you some questions we have raised from our investigation. This is our question. Okay, then this is the end of our presentation. Thank you for your attention. Have a nice day.
All right, thank you. Any questions? So, similar to the previous question, in the question list, what is the main purpose you are trying to find out?
Excuse me. Main question without
what is the main purpose of your questions?
Main purpose. We investigate this topic, and we can't find any answer that question. So we choose the questions.
All right. So I think you in your presentation you well prepared your problems. So
Yeah.
maybe those problems are very important for patients and the doctors and nurses as well. So I think you have investigated as well. However, in the question list, you may have some more information, right? So that's the reason why you are going to ask questions, right? So that
Yeah.
I was wondering what kind of information are there are missing. So that was my point. Well, anyway, all right. So maybe if you have your answer, then you can answer, or if you haven't answered yet, then it's okay. Right. So no questions from students. Right. So thank you for your presentation again. We are 2 more groups to go. So now group 1. Are you there, group 1?
Yes.
Right. So please share your screen and start your presentation when you're ready.
Can you see the PPT slide?
So would you please speak up?
Oh, can you see the PPT slide?
Right, it's great.
Hello, we are group 1 from the IED class. And we have our four teammates. Me and Junseok will make the presentation on the NPU for patients with mental illness, and the 2 other teammates made the PPT for us, and we all of us did the research together. So before starting, these are the contents that we have prepared, and we have divided into 4 categories: introduction, research, problems, and conclusion. So let's begin with the question, what is NPU? NPU is an abbreviation form of negative pressure unit, and the lexical meaning of the word is an isolated room that prevents cross-contamination from room to room. To easily explain how this NPU works, the prevention happens by lowering the air pressure of the room that patients are quarantined so that air could flow from the outside of the room to the inside of the room. Let's see a picture of how NPU looks like. In the picture, you can see nurses or doctors in anti-contamination clothing and facing the patients. And among all of the patients in the NPU, as we said before, we proceeded our project on the patients with mental illness. To make the research on what could be the problem in NPUs for patients with mental illness, we've divided our perspectives to patient side and doctor and nurses side. And Junseok will continue.
So our group did a research about the possible problems that could arise regarding the issue of NPU for patients with mental illness. So first of all, we researched through articles in the internet. By this researching method, we found 2 possible problems, which were cost issue and communication issue. And secondly, we interviewed a potential user of this project. The target of the interview was a nurse who is actually working in Keio Hospital, who is the head nurse, and second was a nurse who is actually working in Ulsan Hospital. So we asked them about the possible problem that could arise regarding the issue of NPU for patients with mental illness. And they both answered that the possible problem would be anxiety that the patients will encounter. So to explain the details about the possible problems, the first problem is cost. The cost that it takes to install a negative pressure room is about 200 million won to 300 million won, which is 2억에서 3억 정도. And not only the cost that it takes to install is expensive, but also the cost to maintain is expensive. As a matter of fact, Korean Hospital Association did a research on over 20 hospitals in Korea if they are maintaining the NPU in their hospital, and the percentage was less than 49% because of its maintenance cost. And the second problem is anxiety due to environmental changes. As I told you in the previous slides, we did an interview with a nurse in Ulsan Hospital and Keio Hospital. Due to the environmental changes, and since NPU is only for 1 person in a room, the patient is staying alone in the room, which could be very severe to the mental illness, and it might worsen the mental illness. And the last problem is communication due to absence of mental support and lack of direct communication. Lots of patients with mental illness basically cannot express their mental and body state correctly. Doctors and nurses cannot stay in the NPU with the patient every time due to infectious disease. So they need to communicate through phones, which is a difficult way to communicate even for normal patients, but it's even harder for patients who have mental illness. So due to these reasons, we have stated 3 possible problems. Which problem do you think is the most severe problem? Well, we our group did the prioritization, and Dongseong will continue about that.
Our 4 teammates had a vote on what could be the main problem of making the MPU for patients with mental illness. Surprisingly, we came up with 4 same answers. As you see in the table, we thought that the cost for building and maintaining MPU will be the prior problem over others, and it was followed by anxiety and communication. And also, as Junseok said, we found out that the budget was the biggest problem why MPUs for patients with mental illness could not be built in other Korean hospitals. So I think this is the reason why we came up with this conclusion. And in conclusion, we found out that cost, anxiety, and communication should be considered when making MPUs for patients with mental illness. And this is a word map of keywords that we used during the team project. And the question that we brought for the is, would there be any method to figure out the amount of pain if patients with mental illness cannot express it themselves? And this was the only question that we had. These are the sources. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I have a question. You interviewed 2 nurses, right? One
Yes, that is correct.
Sun Hospital and one from
KO Hospital.
KO?
Yeah,
Is it?
KO Hospital.
KO?
KO.
So it's like, it's not like a question, it's like a comment, more than comment. So is there a specific reason that you didn't put information about them in a slide?
Oh, well, there is no specific reason why we did not provide the details about the nurses, but yeah, there was no specific reason for that.
They didn't want to put their information on a this kind of presentation so that they kind of feel some burden.
Well, first of all, I thought that stating their names or like their, like, I don't know, their information was kind of I don't know, like a burden for them. So I just stated the hospital and the fact that they are nurse.
All right. So first of all, it is very kind of great to see that you actually have interviewed some people who are working in the field. So it would be better to kind of put some real information that you can give them credit on that, right? There is a question from student Yeon Haeun. Would you go on?
Thank you for the good presentation. I think the cost issue you mentioned in the presentation, installation and maintenance cost applies not only to mental patient, but also to general patient using MPU. Could you give me an example of the additional cost when a mentally ill patient uses MPU?
Could you wait for a sec? I'll have to think about the question.
Can you see the chatting room?
Oh, yeah. So, okay. About this issue, we also thought that this cost issue is not only for the patients who have mental illness. Well, I think it's just general problem for MPU rooms because the cost itself is too expensive. And we thought that if the cost issue cannot be resolved, then other problems would not happen at all. So if the cost issue is set, then we can move on to next problems. So to clarify in Korean, 애초에 그 그 비용적인 문제가 해결이 되지 않는다면은 그게 가장 지금 큰 이슈이기 때문에 그게 해결이 되지 않으면 사실 MPU를 계속해서 가동시키는 것 자체가 어려운 상황이라서 그게 먼저 해결이 돼야 다른 프로블럼들도 나오기 때문에 저희는 그 커스트 이슈를 넣을 수밖에 없다고 생각이 들어서 그게 제너럴한 이슈이긴 하지만 일단 첫 번째로 준 이유입니다. Okay.
All right, any further questions? All right, thank you for your presentation again. And now the final presentation from Group 9. Group 9, are you ready? Great.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Hello, we are Park Juan, Kim Yan, Shin Minju, Chang Jimin from Group 9, and the presenters are Chang Jimin and Kim Yan. The topic that our group will present today is problems that may arise in NPU for patients with mental illness. The three problems we found are the financial difficulties, the difficulty in immediate response, and the deterioration of mental illness. First of all, I will explain about the financial difficulties. NPU needs high cost in-store and additional cost in traditional hospital. As you can see from this table, it costs about 250 million won to install a single negative pressure isolation room and up to 300 million won for a national negative pressure room. Next, the total operating cost is 12 million won, including electricity, filter exchange, and other operating costs. And up to 40 million won is required for a national negative pressure bed. Like this, NPU has a problem that not only mental hospitals, but also traditional large hospitals require many costs to install and operate. In addition, if the patients with mental illness move to another hospital's MPR for treatment, the additional cost of psychiatric nurses and treatment may also be required. The factors of emergency response are complex structure of MPU and more frequent emergencies than elderly patients. MPU has complicated structure to minimize the spread of viruses in the air. Here is how medical staffs got into the MPU. The changing room, the front room, which is 전실 in Korean, and the negative pressure hallway, the front room, and the negative pressure room. The doors between each space must be opened at intervals of 10 seconds. Also, the time to wear the equipment cannot be ignored. Medical staffs who enter and leave the negative pressure isolation room must remove accessories and wear protective equipment that is difficult to wear after disinfection. This process takes at least 10 minutes. Also, mental patients have more emergency situations than other patients. Some mental patients, like dementia patients, which is 치매 환자 in Korean, may not wear masks properly because they do not have proper awareness of infectious diseases, and they may not explain their symptoms to the medical staff because of their illness. Therefore, it is not possible to deal with emergency situations quickly.
Third problem of the MPU for mental patients are deterioration of mental illness. The isolation caused by
Could you put
entering MPU.
one more closer to your mouth?
네.
네, 더 가깝게 해서 얘기해 주세요. 네.
The third problem of NPU for mental patients are deterioration of mental illness. The isolation caused by entering MPU will make psychiatric treatment inaccessible, which will lead to deterioration of mental illness. Mental hospitals tend to encourage mental patients to move around and interact with others, while staffs regularly keep visual checks on them for safety. Group therapy sessions and communal dining is an example of these treatments. However, when a mental patient enters the MPU, these treatments are impossible to perform, as well as the visual checks by staffs. Doc Min-gu, the Chief Nursing Officer of Behavioral Health at Texas Health, has said that no access to therapists, behavioral health programs, and psychiatric medication consultations will be vital to being on the right road to the recovery. Also, studies from NCBI, which is National Center for Biotechnology Information, said that loneliness can lead to psychiatric disorders like depression, personality disorder, or even suicide, which will most likely affect psychiatric patients. Therefore, the isolation caused by the MPU will deteriorate mental illness. Our group thought that the most important problem is the financial problem, followed by difficulty in immediate response and deterioration of mental illness. Financial problems are the biggest problem because it is the essential element that has to be satisfied to perform treatments for respiratory infection diseases. Also, for faster responses to emergencies, more staffs are needed and they have to be paid. Difficulty in immediate response preceded this duration of mental illness because mental patients need continuous care and immediate responses due to the possibility of unexpected actions. The deterioration of mental illness was rated last because the importance of curing life-threatening disease precedes the importance of mental health. Thank you for listening to our presentation about problems in NPU for mental patients, and have a good one.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Any questions from students? Actually, I had one, but I forgot, so I need to retrieve my memory. So while I'm retrieving my memory, are there any questions from students? So you mentioned some the mental kind of have you actually I'm not sure if you did that. Have you tried to figure out the difference between the types of mental illness, like Alzheimer or other autistic problem like that? So can you find, did you find any kind of that kind of difference in the this?
We didn't actually go into the details of illness, mental diseases.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
We didn't go into more details of mental diseases.
Are there any other questions? Would you briefly kind of skip your presentation slides so that I can really remind myself of the question, right? All right, so would you go back to this? This all right, next one. Previous one. Right, so is this a link to an article or
It's a transfer of the title of article. Yeah.
So is the same link with the previous one? Or there's no link, right? So it'll be better if you put some links to actual articles, then maybe I can later refer to those articles and can get some more information. Okay, so I think I did really forget my question. Anyway, seems that there is no further questions from students. So thank you for your presentation again. All right, so this is it for today's presentation, and thank you for all of you for preparing your presentations. I think all of you have done very well. And again, this is the very first step of designing, right? So finding problem is the first step, and we can also find more problems, right? Or while we are researching on this topic. And next week we are going to have the invited talk. So maybe you can ask further questions to the expert, and then your aspect of this problem or this topic can also change, right? So maybe you have other further problems that you are interested in or you think more important, so that you can continue on finding problems while this semester. Of course, at some point you have to design your idea. However, finding problem is the most important thing, because once it is decided, then you can go on your designing, right? So, and also one thing I would like to mention is that first, it is quite a quick comment. So, as the audience for today's presentation is the students, other students, right? So actually you may not need to explain what NPU is, right? So I think most of you have dealt with this the topic very quickly, briefly, because you already know that the audience are students. So it's okay. So that is going to be one of my quick comment. And the other one is, you guys are, most of you have been focusing on some NPU structure, but so therefore there are some questions from students like what are the differences between the situation with the ordinary patients and the patients with mental illness. So maybe the difference can cause because of the difference between the ordinary patient and the patient with mental illness. So maybe you may need to also define what kind of patient you are going to consider. There are, I don't know either. I don't know much about the mental illness either. So there maybe there might be some various kinds of mental illness, right? So like from the autistic mental illness to Alzheimer or some other mental illness. So there are quite various types of mental illness, but so maybe there are, of course, there are common problems with those patients. However, you have to configure the problems specific to each type of mental illness. So maybe next week invited talk, you can ask what kind of mental illness is more severe than the other mental illness type of mental illness. So like that, you can ask that kind of question. So maybe you have to define what kind of mental illness you are going to think about and you are going to deal with, right? 일단 뭐 잘 하셔서 너무 고맙고요. 이게 우리가 이번 학기에는 뭐 여러분은 학점을 잘 받는 게 주 목적이겠지만, 그래도 진짜로 현재 이게 진짜로 시급하게 문제를 해결해야 되는 상황이라고 합니다. 그래서 다음 주에 강연을 이제 하실 분께 더 질문을 더 하면서 사실 우리는 지금은 약간 리서치를 뭐 많이 했을 수도 있고 조금 했을 수도 있겠지만 현장에 계신 분들이 어떤 느낌을, 어떤 문제를 보고 있는지를 더 알면은 더 우리가 문제를 바라보는 그 관점이 달라질 수도 있을 것 같아요. 그래서 좀 더 이 문제에 대해서 좀 심각하게 우리가 또 더 신중하게 풀어볼 수 있으면 좋겠고, 아까 방금 설명도 했지만 그 NPU 유닛에 대한 스트럭처에 대한 고민도 필요하지만 정신 질환이 종류가 굉장히 많을 거예요. 저도 잘 모르지만. 그래서 이게 문제가 될 만한 정신 질환이 있을 수 있고 괜찮은 정신 질환도 있을 수 있고 아니면 좀 정신 질환마다 좀 다르게 접근해야 될 필요도 있습니다. 그래서 그런 것들에 대한 뭐 질문들을 좀 다음 주에 더 해보셔도 좋을 것 같습니다. Right. So next week we have also midterm exam, right? So I think you are gearing up your midterm exam. So did I say that it's going to be online and open book? All right. So next week we are going to have midterm exam on Monday, right? So it is going to be online. So you can go to HDLMS and you'll find a quiz session available from the 4 p.m. on Monday. I'm going to make a post announcement on this as well. However, let me briefly explain about the midterm exam. So midterm exam will start at 4 p.m. on next Monday. Available on HDLMS from the time and 6 p.m. So it's going to be 2 hours long exam, but I don't think you need actually 2 hours to solve all problems. You maybe quicker than that. However, maximum the midterm exam time is 2 hours, so you have to submit your answer before 6 p.m. Don't forget to upload all of your answers before 6 p.m. So maybe you have to consider some uploading time as well, right? So that's the midterm exam time, and the scope of the midterm exam will be from the first lecture, including introduction. Introduction is also included in the scope of the midterm exam, and the last lecture. Actually, that was the last previous week, right? Maybe for today's week, among your presentation, it's also we can consider these your presentations are also one of the topics we have studied in before the midterm exam, right? So maybe I could include some information among your presentation. Anyway, that is the scope. So it's kind of common approach, right? And it will be also an open book exam. You can find anything from the lecture material or lecture slides, or I also allow you to search on Google. So it's open Google, right? However, it is not allowed to ask someone else for help. You can search, but don't upload a question online or don't ask someone else for help. 네, 아직 퀴즈가 없어서 카테고리가 안 보이는 걸 거고요. 카테고리는 그 시험 시간이 되면 뜰 겁니다. 네, 퀴즈 세션이 보일 거예요. 그 시험이 available 해주시면. Right. So, any other questions? 질문 더 있나요? 뭐 시험이나 뭐 앞으로 이 과목에 대해서 없나요? 네, 제가 공지는 어쨌든 다시 올려드릴 테니까요. 네, 이게 11개 조만 하는데도 시간이 다 가네요. 네, 오늘 어쨌든 시험 주간에도 또 발표 준비하느라 고생하셨고, 또 다음 주에는 우리 수업에도 시험이 있죠. 그래서 이번 주, 다음 주 시험 준비할 때도 힘내시고, 다음 주에는 온라인으로 시험을 보니까 온라인으로 보고, 그러니까 다음 주에 또 목요일 날은 또 실시간 그 초청 강연이 있으니까 참고하시고, 혹시나 초청 강연을 못 듣더라도 그 다음 주에 녹화 영상을 대신 질의응답 못 하겠죠. 이제 월요일 날 보시는 식으로 스케줄 저번에 공지 드리는 걸 참고하시면 되겠습니다. 질문이 없으면 오늘 수업은 여기까지 하고요. 네, 다음 주 월요일에 온라인으로 이제 중간고사로 보도록 하겠습니다. 네, 고생하셨습니다.
수고하셨습니다.